Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at Tales of Paranoia, a new comic, well, relatively new, from Crumb. This was published by Fantagraphics Books last year. I think it was the second half of 2025. And I gotta say, I just read this last night, and it kind of made me sad. Crumb is still an amazing illustrator, but it really does seem like he's pulling a Steve Ditko on us, where he's got this esoteric information he wants to convey by any means necessary. He's kind of throwing storytelling out the window, just trying to, make entertainment. Now, granted, it does say here, warning, this comic is not popular entertainment. So there's nothing wrong with an artist, just wanting to do a rant. That's kind of part of Crumb's MO ever since he started. Very personal tales, basically unloading his inner life onto the page for all of us to read. But it was always entertaining, and it was always interesting. And this is just not. There's slight interest in some of this stuff, of course. I've always loved Crumb's character. I thought, like, reading his personal letters, things like that, he just seemed like a guy I felt simpatico with. He was definitely an outsider, weirdo, but I thought he always seemed intelligent and thoughtful. And you still get that sense here. It's not like he's full-on Steve Ditko at this point. And I'm talking about the Steve Ditko of the noughts, when he was self-publishing all those little ranty pamphlets with Robin Snyder, where, he couldn't even draw faces anymore. He just had this need to get this information out, or disinformation, as you will. But he's not at that point. He's still an amazing artist. The craft in here is, beautiful. But it's almost like, as far as trying to, hey, people might want to read a comic, I'm going to draw one, I'm going to make my life interesting. It's just like it seems like he's just trying to, vent about all of this paranoia he's felt since the COVID-19 virus hit in 2020. Love this cover. Very classic, almost like a 50s Atlas comic format. And the one thing about Crumb, the reason why I do admire him, because he says things like this throughout: batshit crazy or true perception, who can tell? He's not such a fanatic that he can't question himself. That's another difference between him and Steve Ditko. Steve Ditko is totally sure he's right. And so we start off with, what is paranoia? And he starts with that famous quote, "Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you." He has this interesting analogy how it's like when you're trying to connect the dots. You might connect them wrong and get a really negative picture. Or maybe it's the right picture. And when he connects the dots, it's a reptilian alien. Some of the more outlandish conspiracy theories out there. But then he just describes an incident in his life, goes to the bathroom. When he comes back, he almost thinks he hears the people there muttering his name and laughing. True paranoia, where you're not quite sure. You distrust people around you. You think maybe they're either despise you or at least are mocking you. He brings up his mother, who was a speed freak. She, back then they called it diet pills. It was okay. After decades of taking them, she was just completely paranoid. She thought her husband was putting listening devices in the TV. She thought there was strange magnetic forces in the attic. So he asked the question, which he's going to ask throughout this comic: where does true perception leave off and paranoid delusion begin? He says, I've got no answers, but it seems like he does definitely believe what he believes. So basically he's telling us that paranoia is no fun. It sucks. It just leaves you with a feeling of dread. But as you can see, this is just so nice to look at. It's just our Crumb, just such a great illustrator. But I do gotta say, it seems like even his, storytelling is duller, artistic storytelling. There's pages in here where it's just his head talking. It's just like, our Crumb would always go on these little rants, but it'd make it more interesting. This is not the most thrilling comic to read visually. And basically just continues to talk about how the world is full of predators. Society's getting more predatory. And we see him talking to a doctor friend during COVID. And basically this doctor friend is saying, Robert, just shut up and trust science. Trust the experts. You got no choice. He's not saying it in such a rude way. They're obviously friends. But our Crumb's trying to convince him that maybe the vaccine is harmful. He's been reading stuff, doing his own research, if you will. And he does bring up the point, which I gotta say, I believe in some conspiracy. I mean, I don't know who said it, but basically, almost all of history is the history of conspiracies. I mean, so many huge events historically, they were conspiracies. The Spanish-American War, the sinking of the Maine, that was a conspiracy. The government said this happened. Turned out it wasn't true. And just to get us into a war. I'm pretty sure there's some, I don't know what happened with the JFK assassination. Obviously, some things don't add up there. Maybe you think I'm a nuts, but if you read enough about it, there's definitely things that happened that, don't really fit the narrative. I don't know what happened, but it's not crazy. I think there's dumber conspiracies and smarter conspiracies. I think dumber conspiracies are that like reptilian aliens control the world like they live. That movie. It's like, I think we would know by now. We would have seen one of them. Things like that. So these guys are basically debating about this. And our Crumb feels like his back is up against the wall. Because to be honest, this guy does sound very sensible. He's a doctor. And he's just like, what are you going to do? These guys studied medicine. You're just going to think they're lying to you? Why not assume they're not? Isn't that the best bet? But it doesn't seem like our Crumb is convinced. But he does have this panel where the friend looks kind of harsh. And he says, you have to trust the experts. You have no other choice. And this is what bridles our Crumb. He tosses and turns into the night thinking, that's what they've been telling us forever. The war in Vietnam. Trust the experts. They know we have to go in there to stop communism. Pretty much almost everyone agrees it was bullshit. But at the time, the experts all said this was necessary. NAFTA, something which was pretty ruinous for 99% of Americans. But they told us, all the economic experts said, we have to do NAFTA. So I'm finding myself sympathizing with Crumb here. I am not an anti-vaxxer. But I get where he's coming from. Is if everyone's just telling you to shut up and trust the experts, I mean, they've been wrong before. So maybe I sound like a kook, but I'm definitely not as kooky as our Crumb. Now he basically bolsters his argument by talking about growing up in the Catholic Church. I think this is a straw dog argument, though, because obviously the Catholic Church is made up hokum. All that, the Bible is just like a fantasy book. So yeah, but they were authorities telling you to just shut up and don't question. I think when, whatever the majority of the world's scientists tell us stuff, it's different than a nun telling us shut up and listen, But it is interesting seeing our Crumb's childhood. He was such a good Catholic, so afraid of going to hell. So now this is where the comic gets really just kind of made me sad. The fact that he has all these panels of him just describing this Rand Corporation paper on detecting conspiracy theories on social media. And basically this report is saying, we should engage with these people, not hostilely, talk to them, try to get them talking with us so they don't see us as the enemy. But our Crumb finds this very insidious. Well, I think he's probably correct. I don't think they've ever done that. I don't think these people have, quote unquote, reached across the aisle. They're usually pretty much just like, okay, you guys are crazy, shut up. Which I don't think is I think is pretty truthful. Maybe they have, who knows? But of course, our Crumb does not like this. And he just thinks it's all hokum. But look at these pages of just him sitting at a desk. He could at least be walking around doing something. Our Crumb could always make everything visually interesting. And this is not. Of course, the art's beautiful. The self-portraits of himself are so good. All these faces are amazing. So this goes on and on. Look at that great face, though. The expressiveness of it. The one thing I do, even though I am praising the art, it's what's the opposite of damning with faint praise? I don't know that expression, but there is a slight decline. The past 20 years, I've seen Crumb's work here and there, and it does seem it's not quite there, which is bound to happen. He's 81 years old when he wrote this. I'm amazed how well he draws at such an advanced age. So many older comic artists we've seen over the, history of the medium, they just really start to decline, even in their 60s. Just stop putting in detail, get lazy, take shortcuts, which I get. You're fucking old and tired. It's like, I'm not going to sit with my arthritic hand and draw every fucking line in this thing, even though I'm in pain. So finally it's over. He just kind of, this is kind of almost a theme of this comic, how he is questioning, like, maybe I'm crazy. But at the end of the day, he quotes Christopher Hitchens in 2006. "My own opinion is enough for me, and I claim the right to have it defended against any consensus, any majority, anywhere, any place, any time. And if you disagree with this, you can kiss my ass." So even though Robert Crumb is not by any means a scientist or studied medicine, he feels like he just seems sure that the vaccine is harmful. He doesn't even really bring up much evidence. I mean, of course, there's always evidence about anything being harmful. Some people might be allergic to M&Ms, but it does seem like, unless there is a vast conspiracy that I don't know about, it does seem like it's pretty rare that vaccines hurt people. And when you consider the history of diseases, they've helped a lot more people. I mean, we don't have polio anymore, or so many diseases, and they used to kill millions a year. So whatever. It's just weird that he's so sure of himself. This is called No Atheists in the Foxholes, and this is just him pleading with God, basically saying, please just make things better. I got grandkids now. Make it better for them. It's not much of a one-pager, but whatever. Now we have Kiss of Death. And this is its subtitle is Bunch's Bad Business Karma. So this is from 2024. Now this was a story, which he explains up here. This was scripted by Aline and me to be one of their jam comics, but it was written way before she died in 22. So they never got around to making it. So I guess around 2024, our Crumb said, this is a good script. I'm going to draw it without Aline, and I'll draw Aline. So Aline basically has this idea, because she thinks she's being paranoid. She's like, it seems like everything I'm involved in, galleries, magazines, books, they all go under after I contribute. It's almost like I'm the harbinger. So like she mentions all these things, and our Crumb's just kind of laughing like, hey, I think you're right. What about that one gallery that closed down right after your first show? There's something to it, weird. But she's really distraught. She's like, oh my God, I've got this curse on me. So she mentions all of it, and publishers that published her book all of a sudden went belly up after publishing her stuff. I wonder if this must have been hard for him to draw since Aline died a couple years earlier. And this is kind of sad. It says back to the present. And now Robert Crumb is alone, making dinner for one. He points that out. He says, Aline, you were a born comedian. It was easy doing comics with you. All I had to do was feed you your lines like Gracie Allen and George Burns. And then he hears her voice saying, don't forget to clean the stove. Sad. Another one-pager where he's talking to God. I'll just stand and wring my hands and cry. Here's a difficult conundrum. So now Robert's kind of ranting about this new vaccine, which has been created by this giant pharmaceutical company, which has a notorious history of paying billions in fines for convictions, for fraud, lots of chicanery. And so this is another thing. I get where our Crumb's coming from. We have seen time and time again that corporations don't give two shits about anyone, just their profits. So for everyone to just be like, you made a vaccine, give it to me. I can understand the fear. They've hurt many people before. We just looked at Skin, the graphic novel about a thalidomide baby. Thousands of kids were just lied to by this pharmaceutical company, and all these babies were born with deformities. So it's happened time and time again. They never really pay the price. So I get where he's coming from. But once the vaccines did come out and millions upon millions of people took it, then it's time to shut up. Well, see, he's probably thinking I'm being as bad as his detractors. You can talk all you want about it. Don't shut up. But it's just like, okay, would you rather get COVID? So at the end, he says, I opt out. Not going to get the shots. So he's pretty sure in his beliefs. Now, this is just too much. Even though we do have beautiful R. Crumb lettering, which is I always like seeing his lettering. So this is about a conspiracy theory. And basically we have a quote by this professor of philosophy, very respected guy named Qasim Qasim. And he has a book called Conspiracy Theories. And he talks about, why conspiracy theorists, how they operate, even implying they're corrosive to society. Basically making it seem like conspiracy theories are a threat. This is something else that really rankles Crumb. He then quotes this one guy, Robert Malone, who was one of the few dissenters from the medical field. He sounds like he's a real doctor. He doesn't sound like some fake doctor like you see on YouTube. And he actually is writing this letter, an interview, where he's basically saying, a lot of my colleagues, their careers have suffered just for saying, hey, I don't know about these vaccines. I don't think they're that safe. We're not sure. And people basically just said, you're the enemy. You're keeping us from getting rid of COVID. So you're basically a threat to society. And he mentions one of the theories of COVID was getting rid of the useless eaters. That's a term in conspiracy theories where, the rich elite, they would love to just get rid of, tons of people who are just, poor the drains on society as they see it, even though they're doing all the work. I don't know who would make them lattes if they got rid of all of us. So basically, the question authorities, the moral of this. Yeah, I find all of his thinking in this suspect. It's a little... And the weird thing is, for such a weird pervert that our Crumb has been his whole life, I always kind of agreed with him. I know this doesn't probably shed a good light on me, but I always been like, yeah, this is just... I'm simpatico with this guy. I kind of agree with him. At least inside, you know, I would never act on these things, just like he doesn't, for the most part. He's... for all of his perverted comics, I don't think there's ever been a Me Too thing about our Crumb. He gets it all out on paper. And so now we move on to the very worst LSD trip I ever had. Cleveland, mid-'66. It's Robert Crumb with his first wife. They decided to take LSD. This guy, Pete Cornell, and the scientist and his wife were offering free LSD as long as you took it in their apartment and so they could observe you. They probably worked at a university that, studied LSD. Crumb had already taken LSD at this point, but this time he had a particularly bad trip. Right off the bat, he puked up his guts. And then he felt all weird about it. Even Dana agreed. She said, these people aren't like us. And everything starts to look insidious to our Crumb. A picture of a baby becomes scary and monstrous. Even the music of Shostakovich has a feeling of apocalyptic doom. Now this guy, Pete Cornell, he's kind of like, totally just seems like a square G. But then he's like fucking with his head. He tells our Crumb, blah, 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 and now you're going to die. Which is like, don't tell someone having a bad trip that. But then he says typical stuff like, you're really beautiful when you're turned on. But this did not soothe our Crumb. He felt even more paranoid. Pete Cornell started looking almost like a reptilian. Started looking very creepy. And then what happened after that, he blocked in his memory. Years later, he actually went to hypnotherapy. Oh, maybe not years later, just whatever, later. And when that moment came in his hypnotherapy, he freaked out. He's almost like, I don't think I ever want to remember that time. Now, the next time we went over to Pete Cornell's house, he had some young kid there who wants to do LSD. And it sounds like he's having a horrible trip. He's screaming. So Peter leaves the room where they were all hanging out. I was like, I got to check on this kid. And our Crumb, tries to say, this sounds like what I went through last time I was here. Maybe I could talk to him. And Pete turns to them and yells, I think you should leave right now. And throws their jackets at him. So, of course, our Crumb was all like, what's up with this Pete Cornell for years? And he tried to do research about him. He doesn't know much, but apparently this guy worked in the biochemistry field for years and was part of dolphin experiments in the late 70s. And Pete Cornell died some years ago, and our Crumb's pissed. He's like, God damn it, I wanted to talk to that motherfucker. So seems to be a code word. Our Crumb really doesn't like people in the biochemistry field. They're part of the medical industrial complex. So now we have an epilogue. And this is our Crumb kind of summing up. He says, a year passed since I drew this. And he's had a breakthrough about his 1966 LSD experiment. God, that's just a great panel there. Look at his face. Really great. And that was a comic called Deep State Woman, where he just profiles You know, he starts it off. Here's an setup. Just because Donald Trump was always ranting about how the deep state was out to get him doesn't mean there isn't a deep state. It exists, and it's very deep. And I guess he studied this woman, and he basically gives us all of her accomplishments. And he doesn't even say her name because he's afraid she'll come after him. And it just seems like it's this woman who, her parents were doctors. She graduated from Harvard Medical School. She completed her residency during the AIDS crisis. And it sounds like she was a young altruistic doctor. But then she rises up through all these like government commissions, national institutes for infectious diseases. She worked for Dr. Anthony Fauci, which to our Crumb is obviously a red flag. She became something under the Clinton administration, some position, whatever. And it just seems like she's either working for the government, working for a huge National Institute of Medicine, or on the board of some corporation. And then she marries a guy who seems very similar. He's also a deep state guy who has all these like fancy jobs. Now, both of these people have totally been indicted. They've definitely been up to some shenanigans. They had to go to court. She was accused of acting illegally and outside the scope of her authority and suppressing information about drugs, so the pharmaceutical company that she worked for could release them without a problem. I mean, that's a serious, horrible thing to do. Speaking of the thalidomide, it's a similar thing. Luckily, nothing happened. But, of course, they're rich. They're connected, so they come out smelling like roses. Keep getting appointed to, like, all these high presidential commissions. And that's all this comic is. Just keeps telling us, and then this happened. Now in 2023, she's the World Health Organization. She's in their expert group. President Biden announced her appointment to some fancy medical board for the government. And our Crumb just says, she's a deep state woman. It sounds like the great title of a classic rock song. She's a deep state woman. Oh, yeah. But this is a sign, what I'm talking about. Now, look at this, just great illustration. But this reminds me of David Chelsea's work, where it's like, this is all kind of interesting information, but I could have just read an article with all of this information. It's not like these drawings, which just look like they were taken from photos, not very imaginative. It's just like, okay, yeah, it just seems like a piss poor waste of the comic form, Just write an article about this if you want to let us know about this deep state woman. God, look at this great first panel here. I'm not afraid of the virus, but yes, I'm afraid. God, he's still just so good at logos. That's an amazing logo. So it's just him talking about waking up in the middle of the night all the time. He says sometimes he gazes into the darkness and it seems filled with frantically wriggling, squirming, writhing things. What are they? And sometimes they coalesce into a beast. This looks like something from a 50s Golden Age comic, like a Atlas pre-code horror or something. Where bloodthirsty. Wow, our Crumb actually spelled something wrong. I've never seen him do that. We're a bloodthirsty species, no getting around it. But there's some truly cold-blooded people in this world. God, look at that. It's like fucking Hans Bach or Virgil Finlay or something. I'm not afraid of any virus. I'm afraid of them. And he shows all these people. There's Donald Trump. Now, the thing is, I'm sure Wayne Fauci's in here, which is just like equating. I mean, yeah, maybe I'm just woefully naive, but the little I know of Wayne Fauci is like, he spent years fighting, all these viruses, AIDS, and trying to find a cure. It doesn't really seem like he's in power over me. It seems like he's selflessly dedicated himself to curing disease. Now, of course, I'm a pretty cynical guy. Maybe I should do research and find out. But just lumping him in with someone like Donald Trump, it's just like, come on. You're being ridiculous. And who knows who these other people are? I don't know. I have no idea. They are well drawn, though, but kind of just whatever, photo referenced. It's interesting. Now we pull back, and our Crumb is like just talking about the page he drew. Like, ooh, it was depressing drawing all those assholes. But I'm pretty happy with the way it came out. It looks nice graphically. So now basically he's talking about all these assholes. Why are there people like this? They're a certain type A type personality, or never satisfied, or just being happy themselves. They always have to, whatever, force shit on other people. And once again, he brings up doubt about scientists. And here's the widespread public image of a scientist. But I mean, he does bring up a point once again. A lot of scientists do work for the government, making horrible weapons, biological warfare. The government doesn't come up with those. They need scientists to do it. So when you think in history, all the scientists who just, went along. But once again, maybe me being naive, all the scientists I know, I've known a few, they really love science. They might have to compromise themselves to get grants and do shit they don't want to do, like work for the government, to work for the military. But it seems like most of them just want to find out what the hell's going on in nature, what makes nature tick. Here he is arguing with this woman. He's like, I'm not getting the vaccine. She says, well, I believe in science. Here's another boring page. And look at this, guys, which I think Crumb probably did with almost a nod and a wink, He pulls a Steve Ditko where his rant takes over the art. The fact that he does it so slowly and in perfect rhythm, I think he knows what he's doing. He's almost making fun of himself until eventually all we can see is his eye. But he starts talking about 5G towers. I think our Crumb in his isolation's gotten into down a lot of rabbit holes that are just, he doesn't mention chemtrails, but I'm sure he's looked into it. It's just like really stupid shit like that. That is just dumb. Like I said, I'm totally think there's many conspiracies that have happened in this world. They never will stop as long as there's powerful people. And it's getting worse, I think, where the government is just full on lying to us now, even though we're watching videos of things happening. The government's saying, no, that didn't happen. You're not seeing that. So, you know what I mean? We're going to have way more conspiracies. And he just lists off all these pharmaceutical companies, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, basically all the people, the power elite, the IRS. That's all this is. And then he literally just ends it like that. Like just him ranting, just babbling like a senile old man almost. Just like, here's a list of everything bad, all the power things. Now, I'm not saying he's wrong. A lot of these things do have undue influence on our life. And it's not good. But this isn't a good comic. I'm sorry. It's a well-drawn comic. Now we have another one-pager talking to God. God help me. Crumb whines to God again. And once again, he's whining to God. Why is life so harsh and cruel? And basically, it seems like God goes against him and says, yeah, trust the sages. They know better. God basically says, it's not up to me to make these things. I leave it in the hand of the sages. So just trust them. They have your best interests at heart. Now we have the ultimate paranoia. And this is just, a suspicion of the real truth of our existence, which is like a classical philosophical dilemma. Why are we here? Where did we come from? I mean, it's kind of scary to think about. This is some really nice stuff. See, I just wish some of those ranting comics had this kind of visual imagination going on. He suspects that maybe we're all created by aliens, and all of our travails and shitty paths and lives we lead, it's just for the entertainment of these aliens. And every now and then they intervene. They stop the world from ending. Like they stop North Korea from sending a missile at us. They might intervene. We don't know it, just because they want to keep watching us because we're entertaining. So that's it. Tales of Paranoia by R. Crumb. Hope you guys enjoyed looking at it with me. Oh, I forgot to mention there's a 5G tower. They do look pretty insidious, don't they? Like something from a science fiction book. I hope you guys like looking at this with me. And I don't know, I'm really curious if you guys have read this, what your comments are. I've been pretty harsh on this comic. I love R. Crumb stuff. I got almost everything he's ever done. And this came as kind of a sad surprise for me. So it's still definitely interesting, worth owning, even if there's no words at all. Just the art is, it's R. Crumb. But I don't know. It's like reading later Steve Ditko stuff, where it's a little sad. So thanks for watching, guys, and I hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.